Welcome to Philosophy of Value Workshops number 34 of Series 7. The question for today is the idea of the meaning of life still relevant to a modern philosophy of life? Reading from one of my works, The Pursuit of Value, Chapter 5, Sections 1, 2 and 6. In these workshops, I'm working out certain problems of human existence and consciousness in terms of value. We have recently discussed ethics, Nietzsche's aesthetic justification, and the priority of values. Today, we are discussing how meaning and purpose express values that are central to human life. To help explain the significance of value here, we can outline its functions, that is, the functions of value, in three key contexts. 1. In religion, God is the highest value, providing both a focus and a framework of meaning and purpose. 2. Ethical principles are values that guide moral action, thought by some to be a precondition of meaning. And 3, a meaningful life is also a valuable and worthwhile life. Yet before unpacking the relations between life, meaning and value, we need to define what we are talking about. We must first distinguish epistemic meaning, as in what does this sentence mean, from the experiential meaning of meaning in life that we are talking about today. Also, meaning of life implies that there is some inherent meaning that we can discover, whereas meaning in life is something to be worked out the best we can. Another distinction is between meaning and purpose. I take it that meaning incurs some kind of felt experience that extends through time. Purpose, though, is directed towards some objective that may or may not result in meaning. I will be talking about both meaning and purpose as expressions of value. And like other concepts, the concept of meaning is an anthropocentric construction subject to interpretation. That is, like the interpretation of other concepts such as truth, beauty, freedom, justice and rights. And on this anthropocentric view, states like ethics, aesthetics and meaning don't have automatic priority of value. Such states need to compete with each other for priority on criteria such as outlined a few weeks ago. I also see states like ethics, meaning, purpose and aesthetics on a spectrum of value of varying properties. So value states like meaning or purpose will be amalgams of different states and properties. And this perspective has implications for our understanding of meaning and value. For example, it has implications for framing the question in the form of the meaning of life. Many of these implications are unacceptable, like 1. There is one answer to the question which has universal application. 2. It assumes that the question is coherent and that it has priority over other questions. And 3. That the answer is externally located, expressed in the erroneous cliche that the truth is out there. Conversely, it is also often mistakenly believed that life is meaningless because there is no purpose in the world. But value and purpose in human life and the world are two different kinds of things. So the world may not have inherent meaning, but I could still find meanings subjectively in my life. and this is my position here. But none of those earlier assumptions about meaning are philosophically acceptable. So the meaning of life isn't a philosophically respectable question in the manner that it is presented. But because the question has been so enduring, we have to sort out what it could mean. We need to redefine the question in a way that makes sense. One way to understand the question of meaning is as a metaphor for something that we need to clarify. To do this, we can clarify both the kind of state that meaning is, as well as its essential components. We have previously cited 4 states of cognition, affect, will and value, in which meaning is a value state. And we can discuss numerous factors like cognition, knowledge, happiness, freedom and ethics. Using these factors, we can first define and describe the character of meaning by comparison and contrast to ethics. Both ethics and meaning are value-based activities, and both of these activities raise the issue of truth in an analysis of meaning. Firstly, as an aspect of truth, we can say that meaning in life is susceptible to facts in my life. That is, to find my life's work is useless, or my wife doesn't love me, can drain my life of meaning. We might argue that it need not, but facts nevertheless usually affect meaning. But ethics has a way of evading facts by saying that my actions were moral because I had good intent. Utilitarians would disagree, but Kantians and others would agree on the significance of moral intent. Secondly, meaning is an embracing attitude that can be said to colour every aspect of my life. But ethics typically makes judgments about specific aspects of life deemed to be ethical. Virtue theories would disagree, but even they would distinguish different virtues. So ethics and meaning differ in their relations to particulars and in their relations to facts. Related to this observation, I previously explained that values are largely determined by their objects. So these different objects of ethics and meaning produce different value experiences. And we can continue by considering what kind of facts or things might sustain meaning. We can consider several criteria noted above, like morals, freedom, choice and other people. For Peter Singer, meaning is found in an ethical life. Moral action both engenders and is justified by meaning. A meaningful life requires ethical concern for others as a wider purpose in life than ourselves. But meaning isn't identical to or can be defined solely by ethical experience because, one, other activities apart from ethics, like the pursuit of excellence, can also produce meaning. Two, meaning and ethics are different states or conditions as shown above in their relation to facts and goodwill. But for Robert Nozick, an absence of free will undercuts meaning in life, and freedom as a prerequisite of meaning has also a basis in modern culture, existentialism and ethics. But this doesn't mean that freedom is necessarily a criterion of meaning. Yet free will is nevertheless a precondition of morality and moral value, which can't be chosen without free choice. But empirical observations show that that freedom as indispensable to meaning is a cultural bias, and lack of freedom doesn't always preclude meaning for people without the required freedom. So freedom seems to be a contingent criterion of meaning which doesn't explain what meaning is. And Hubert Dreyfus makes a further criticism of an indiscriminate application of freedom. He criticizes how some existentialists uncritically assign meaning to things without restraint. Dreyfus regards this as ultimately an unlivable, indiscriminate and obtuse response to life. Conversely, the meaning of events cannot be either accepted as simply given or chosen as acts of pure will. Yet the meaning of things is sometimes internalized slowly through our unconscious experiences in life. And meanings are also consciously reinterpreted and molded to our own preferences by choice. And these experiences and choices are influenced by facts and qualified by truth. Questions of truth and fact are often examined in cognitivist theories of meaning. David Wiggins provides us with such an account of cognitivist and non-cognitivist theories of meaning. Cognitivism explains activities like morals, motivation and meaning in terms of reason and perception. Following Hume, non-cognitivists explain such activities in terms of feeling and affect. Yet I must presuppose that the actual experience of meaning must be a non-cognitive state. But on cognitivist theories, cognition enters into explanations of meaning in different ways. And cognitive states obviously support many, if not all, non-cognitive experiences of meaning. I'll give several examples of such shortly. Wiggins uses the myth of Sisyphus to explain these two cognitive and non-cognitive theories of meaning. Sisyphus is condemned by the gods to roll a stone up a hill only for it to repeatedly roll down again. On a cognitivist view, Sisyphus' work is meaningful only on a tangible outcome, for example, the building of a monument. On this view, meaning is neither constituted by cognition or is obtained through cognition as a means. Wiggins also considers the non-cognitivist view, but finds it inadequate in its current form. On this non-cognitivist view, meaning is a psychological experience which doesn't depend on cognition. Wiggins adds that, on this view, it is values that are metaphorically injected into the veins of Sisyphus. Wiggins says a lot that we can't repeat here, but he raises two important points for our discussion. One, that non-cognitivist theories of meaning usually appeal to values. And two, the difficulty of incorporating truth and objectivity into a theory of meaning. Wiggins is critical of both cognitivist and non-cognitivist theories of meaning, but he argues that non-cognitivists cannot appeal to objectivity that they need without contradiction. That is, their theory of meaning must appeal to objectivity to make it stick, but appealing to objectivity is a cognitivist condition and contradictory for non-cognitivism. Yet a couple of questions here are, must meaning appeal to something other than itself? And must this something else be objectivity? In my view, normativity in meaning can be derived from internal subjective structures. I will say something about this later. Another criticism Wiggins makes of a non-cognitivist theory of meaning is that it neglects outcome. This is because meaning is susceptible to facts, like the outcomes of our actions, as well as objectivity. Wiggins is correct. Too little attention is usually paid to outcome as contributing to meaning. But again, in my view, there ought not to be such great dependence on outcome. That is, I argue for a preference for a sufficiency of value and an independence from satisfying outcomes. And conversely, cognitivism is too dependent on outcome and on supporting cognitive frameworks. This is a major factor in considering how theories of meaning cope with death. That is, death negates all final outcomes which cognitivist theories depend upon. There is also a tradition of a certain independence or indifference to outcomes that we can refer to. This thinking is found in Christianity, Kant, Hegel, and in G.K. Chesterton's view that in order to succeed, a soldier or anyone must seek his life in a spirit of furious indifference to it. And although Wiggins criticises cognitivism as well as non-cognitivism, he doesn't mention the problem of death. And death, as the outcome that removes the future, is a huge problem for cognitivist theories of meaning. We will also look at the problem of death for theories of meaning in general later. Yet we need to look more closely at cognitive frameworks which do support deep experiences of meaning. Religion, for example, offers the idea of God, which integrates and supports all the believers' beliefs and values. Wiggins notes that focus is a major requirement of meaning which the idea of God provides. Also, other people as both society and as those we love are the highest forms of value that we can find in the world. Relations with other people confer meaning, and their intrinsic value reflects onto our own self-value. Thirdly, ethical and other beliefs are also cognitive frameworks which provide great meaning and purpose. And unlike aesthetic experiences, which also produce meaning, ethics is also thought to be objective. Fourthly, meaning in life is often attained by achievement. That is, achievements like passing exams or sending a rocket to the moon. And lastly, meaning is also derived from familiarity with certain objects or actions. This is contrary to Nietzsche's existentialist advice of choosing a purpose and affirming it. Yet these are all powerful examples of meaning that are derived through cognitive relations. One way of understanding all these different ways of finding meaning is as forms of synthesis. God synthesizes beliefs, we are brought together with other people, ethics attains ideals, achievement brings together aspiration and outcome, and familiarity brings comfort of the known. Yet the idea of synthesis has also been used by other theorists to explain moral and aesthetic values and experiences. To differentiate meaning from morals and aesthetics, we must distinguish their different objects as above. Another aspect of cognitive theory of meaning is the above noted requirement of objectivity, and we can distinguish two ways in which this requirement is expressed. One is the agent engaged in the experience of meaning, the other is of the observing theorist. With respect to the agent, we can ask, what is the function of objectivity here? And its function appears to give status, validation, and justification to the experience of meaning. The agent isn't interested in epistemological ontological or universal theories of objectivity. The point is that objectivity for the agent is a contingent matter replaceable by something else with the same function. For example, something like existential choice, pragmatic truth, divine command, or other people's authority. With respect to the theorist, the function of objectivity is more obvious. It is to give order and coherence to the theory, so we're not just making unsubstantiated or incoherent claims. Non-cognitivists can claim order and coherence out of a belief that such will eventually be found. Yet it is my position that order and coherence can be found in the structures and dynamics of consciousness and value. I make this case elsewhere and in other workshops and don't have space to do so here. But I can at least indicate how such an argument can start with the help of phenomenology. That is, like Heidegger, Sartre starts with the being of the self as consciousness is value, and that, I quote, reflective consciousness cannot arise without at the same time disclosing values. He holds that choice isn't just a preference but a selection traced back to its ontological foundation, and that every choice supposes elimination and selection, thereby producing value. But this is just a snippet from a structural account that I give elsewhere. The above deals with the problem of order, coherence and objectivity in terms of subjective structures of consciousness. The problem of cognition as dependent on fact was seen as a means to an end in a synthesis of cognition. Yet there is another issue of a sufficiency of value and an independence from cognitive frameworks. That is, the character of meaning involves a certain sufficiency or independence from loss, even in the form of death. And sufficiency in meaning is comparable to others like happiness, moral fortitude, and in ethics. Sufficiencies of value are also found in such states as self-esteem, love, maturity, magnanimity, and courage. Happiness is another form of sufficiency because the experience of happiness is an experience in itself. Yet happiness is subject to circumstances and cognitive considerations to some extent. Pleasure typically has physiological origins and is less influenced by cognitive factors. Yet the sufficiency of values and meaning can be contrasted to other forms of sufficiency. For example, the principle of sufficient reason calls for adequate explanations or grounds of existence for everything, and sufficient and necessary conditions is a logical requirement. The kind of sufficiency we find in meaning is a relative independence from the vicissitudes of life, and these include loss and death that we'll be discussing next week. Yet as implied, sufficiencies of ethics, meaning and purpose are instances of sufficiencies of value, and the sufficiency of value is again explained in detail elsewhere. Yet value sufficiency can also be compared to another more widely known notion of self-validation. Self-validation exists as an a priori principle in logic, mathematics, and arguably in Descartes' I think, therefore I am. But principles of logic, and even the I think, therefore I am, can't establish principles of value or meaning. Yet as a critique of the will to power, Heidegger describes the will to will in a similarly self-validating way. He writes that the will to will forces the calculation and arrangement of everything for itself. Bernard Williams makes a similar point when he says that Nietzsche rightly claims that morality, in this wide sense, demands to be understood as self-sufficient. Ronald Dworkin similarly derives a positive and self-validating aspect from Hume's critique of the is-ought principle. Dworkin speaks of an independence of morality as a separate department of knowledge, and this positive interpretation sets another boundary around the independence of value. That is, fundamental questions of ethics and value must be answered within value, not outside it. My own point is that the will to value is self-validating, not only because value and meaning can be sufficient in itself, but because the alternative is contradictory, self-negating and self-defeating. Not to value value is contradictory because value is presupposed by the system of value judgments that we have adopted. Not to value value is self-defeating due to the claim that value is the culminating state of human satisfaction. And not to value value is self-negating because it is a self-validating principle. Yet again, these claims rest on arguments made in other workshops. As above, examples of sufficiencies of affect rather than value can be found in states of happiness and pleasure. That is, happiness and pleasure are happy and pleasurable in themselves, relatively independent of externals. But again, happiness and pleasure are affect states, meaning and purpose are value states. So we have defined meaning by various means such as modes of value, contrast to ethics, and cognitive syntheses. David Wiggins suggested that value focus is an essential ingredient of meaning, and two major features of meaning were self-validation and sufficiency of value and meaning. These features were particularly significant in the face of the vicissitudes of life and death, and the question of meaning in the face of oblivion is another important feature. Yet we will discuss meaning and death next week. Having defined meaning in this way, the next question is, how do we have a meaningful life? The definition was difficult, but our observations made a practical answer easier. The practical answer is about choosing correct values and finding cognitive syntheses. Or one could say, be wise and be yourself, which is a very difficult task to sort out. In my view, correct values are determined at the structural level, not at the level of material content in the world. Correct values are illustrated in Sartre's criticism of a spirit of seriousness, that subjective values are objective, and they can be found in the suggested criteria of coherence, consistency, will to truth, and will to value. Incoherence and inconsistency of value can be found in anxiety, alienation, and anomie. And being yourself as a form of cognitive synthesis is much deeper than existentialists suppose. For example, Nietzsche's advice for a meaningful life is to choose a purpose and to affirm it as your own. But as we have seen, choosing a purpose and being authentically yourself can be complicated. This is because being yourself is subject to social, genetic, and unconscious forces that existentialists often ignore. A synthesis within myself must also include Jungian archetypes and internalized ideas. So the idea of meaning as existential choice, cognitive synthesis, or value sufficiency seems to be inadequate. Of course, as I have said a number of times, value sufficiency is insufficient because of human finitude. And the idea of purpose shows how meaning as value sufficiency is inadequate. Firstly, purpose is both needed and produced by a reflective human consciousness that is required to choose. The problem of justifying purpose is resolved by it being inescapably produced by consciousness. That is, reflective consciousness throws up questions that cannot be avoided without dissatisfaction, such as what is the organizing principle for the theory and practice of meaning, and what is a supposedly inherently sufficient principle of value leading to. In my view, an answer can be found in a continuously developing will to value towards greater sufficiency of value, and that process is an inescapable structure of consciousness. A basic example of such inescapability is Sartre's idea that we are condemned to choose, condemned to be free. But Martin Heidegger and Edmund Husserl offer an account of time that extends the inescapability of value. Heidegger emphasized temporality and time as the horizon of being. Husserl spoke of the flow of consciousness and the flow of becoming, in which every experience has necessarily been preceded in time by experiences. That is, we find ourselves in a world of time or temporality, as well as diversity, divisibility, selection and choice. The diversity of the world demands selections and choices that produce value. Yet consciousness is also moving through time as well as diversity in space, and values must be continually produced to cope with the flow of existence. Valuing value and the will to value is therefore an inescapable property of consciousness, and that inexorable process of value can give us purpose as well as meaning. The intimate relation between meaning, value and consciousness provides that purpose. This is because value as a state of consciousness can become a future objective as well as a process, or more specifically a particular mode of value that is a sufficiency of value. In conclusion, one of my objectives here has been to show how meaning is one of the key expressions of value, and that meaning, which includes the problem of death, can be both defined and resolved in terms of value. Yet we have seen that meaning involves numerous factors like cognition, synthesis, objectivity, focus and truth, and that meaning as value can be qualified by self-validation and as a sufficiency of value. But as a subjective experience, our own critical faculties require meaning to have order and direction. Cognitivists suppose that truth and fact have more functions than giving order and direction, but I hope to have provided such elsewhere with structures of consciousness and value, and that these same structures and dynamics also deliver meaning and purpose in life. One of the greatest challenges, however, for the experience of meaning and purpose in life is the prospect of death. Yet a sufficiency of value in the present is proposed as a means to confront death as the removal of the future. In this respect, the answer proposed for living a meaningful life is the same as that to confront death. So next week we'll be discussing the problem of death as it bears upon meaning. So let me have your criticisms or comments at the meeting or on websites like Zoom and meetup.com.